Hello there, and welcome to the Sleepy Universe Night. Tonight, we drift across a wine-dark sea into the heart of an ancient world, exploring the enduring mysteries of a story that has shaped human imagination for over 3,000 years. We will look closely at the sky over a Mediterranean island, where a perfectly timed solar eclipse anchors a myth in astronomical reality. We will explore the forgotten botanical chemistry of ancient islands, where a single flower could erase a man's memory of his home. We will uncover the massive prehistoric fossils that inspired the terrified whispers of giants in the dark. And we will unravel the rhythm of a musical code that allowed a sweeping saga to survive centuries without a single written word. It is a journey into the ancient mind, the unforgiving ocean, and the quiet resilience of the human spirit. Before we set sail, I invite you to let your shoulders soften. Allow your breathing to slow and let your grip on the day loosen. There is nowhere else you need to be, and nothing else you need to solve tonight. If you enjoy these gentle journeys, I invite you to like, subscribe, or share a thought below. It helps others find their way here too, one sleepy soul at a time. Let's begin. A deeply ancient story does not usually begin with precise astrophysics. We are accustomed to thinking of mythological tales as pure imagination, woven from the fears and dreams of early civilizations. When we look back at the Bronze and Iron Ages, we expect to find gods moving mountains and monsters rising from the sea. The narrative of a king struggling to return home to his island after a long, brutal war is generally accepted as a beautiful, sprawling fairy tale. Yet, hidden within the very climax of this ancient poem is a chilling, mathematically precise anomaly. It is a detail that sits quietly in the text, largely ignored by literary scholars for centuries who assumed it was simply a dramatic metaphor. What makes this so captivating is that the ancient bards were not just spinning fiction. They were recording the physical mechanics of the universe, preserving a terrifying natural phenomenon inside a web of poetry. It is a reminder that our ancestors watched the skies with intense, unblinking focus. A myth does not always invent its darkness. Sometimes, it simply remembers a day when the light actually died. The sky over the island of Ithaca goes completely black in the middle of a feast. In the final, most violent act of the story, as the weary traveler prepares to reclaim his home from those who have pillaged it, a strange vision descends upon the dining hall. A seer stands up among the revelers and describes a creeping horror. He speaks of the walls sweating blood and the sun perishing out of heaven. He warns the men that a lethal mist is spreading across the ground, and that the sky is shrouded in a sudden, unnatural night. For generations, readers understood this merely as a poetic device, a symbolic foreshadowing of the death and doom that was about to fall upon the uninvited guests. The imagery is terrifying and surreal, painting a picture of a world tilting out of balance. But this was not just a symbol. It was a precise observational record of a celestial event that completely alters our understanding of the text. It is a profound realization that poetry and science often share the exact same vocabulary. A shadow falling over the earth can be both a divine warning and a simple alignment of orbital spheres. Modern astronomers can rewind the clock of the solar system with staggering accuracy. Because the orbits of the Earth and the Moon are governed by the strict laws of celestial mechanics, their paths through the void of space are entirely predictable, both forward into the future and backward into the deep past. By using complex computer models, astrophysicists can calculate the exact position of the Sun, the Moon, and the stars on any given day, thousands of years ago. This field of study, known as archaeoastronomy, allows scientists to test the claims made in ancient texts against the immutable physics of the cosmos. When researchers began looking closely at the specific astronomical clues scattered throughout the poem, they noticed the phase of the Moon, the position of the constellations Pleiades and Boötes, and the visibility of Venus. They realized these were not random decorative details. They were a sequence of coordinates. They were a map drawn in starlight. That possibility is astonishing. It means that whoever composed this story was pulling data from a real, specific moment in human history, locking a fleeting arrangement of stars into an eternal narrative. The celestial clues align on a single, indisputable spring afternoon. When astrophysicists fed the poem's specific astronomical references into their orbital models, they were looking for a rare convergence. They needed a total solar eclipse visible from the Ionian Islands, preceded by a specific new moon. With the correct constellations resting on the horizon exactly as the ancient verses described, the mathematics yielded only one possible match in the era when the story takes place. A total eclipse plunged the region into sudden, freezing darkness on April 16 in the year 1178 BC. The path of totality swept directly across the Mediterranean, turning midday into a twilight where stars became visible and the temperature plummeted. The seer in the dining hall was not describing a supernatural curse. He was describing the physical reality of the moon passing perfectly between the earth and the sun, an event so traumatizing and awe-inspiring that it became the anchor point for a legend. This is not just a mythological coincidence. It is a time capsule buried in verse. The alignment of the cosmos gave birth to a memory that refused to fade. Finding a hard, scientific truth inside a myth forces us to look at the entire story differently. If the ancient storytellers perfectly preserved the exact date and visual terror of a solar eclipse from the 12th century BC, we must ask ourselves what other realities are hidden beneath the surface of the epic. The monsters, the witches, and the impossible landscapes suddenly feel less like pure invention and more like distorted reflections of a very real, very dangerous world. The text is no longer just a beautiful song about a hero's journey. It becomes a distorted mirror reflecting the authentic traumas, geographical mysteries, and survival instincts of an ancient people navigating an unforgiving sea. The veil between fantasy and history grows remarkably thin, suggesting that every wild legend begins with a seed of absolute truth. It changes the way we listen to the voices of the past. Even the most fantastical stories are often just reality, filtered through the immense, echoing corridors of time. The Mediterranean was once a thriving, deeply interconnected web of glittering empires. Long before the events of this sweeping narrative begin, the Late Bronze Age stood as an era of unprecedented globalization and astonishing wealth. Powerful, established kingdoms, the Egyptians, the Hittites, the Mycenaeans, and the Assyrians, spanned the known world, bound together by intricate and heavily trafficked trade routes. Ships laden with massive ingots of copper from Cyprus and rare tin from distant shores crossed the sea to forge bronze, the essential lifeblood of their economies and militaries. Kings exchanged polite diplomatic letters, raw ivory, lapis lazuli, and gold, constructing vast palace economies that seemed entirely too massive to ever fall. The ancient harbors bustled with an extraordinary exchange of languages, art, and highly complex bureaucracy. This was a world operating at the absolute peak of its technological and cultural capacity. It was an era that believed deeply and comfortably in its own permanence. Yet, complexity often masks a profound fragility. A system so intricately connected is only as strong as its weakest thread. Around the 12th century BC, this vast and complex network of civilization violently unraveled. In what feels like a historical blink of an eye, the thriving palace economies of the Mediterranean basin suffered a catastrophic, cascading systems failure. Historians and archaeologists call it the Bronze Age collapse, a sudden apocalypse brought on by a perfect storm of severe, decades-long droughts, devastating seismic earthquakes, and the mysterious arrival of aggressive maritime marauders known only as the Sea Peoples. Entire capital cities were burned to the ground and abandoned, never to be resettled. The complex trade routes that brought tin to copper dissolved entirely, halting the production of bronze and plunging wealthy kingdoms into immediate, violent scarcity. Within a single human lifetime, empires that had stood for 1,000 years were reduced to ash and silence. What makes this so gripping is the absolute totality of the ruin. It is a reminder that even the most advanced and confident societies are fiercely vulnerable to the shifting temper of the earth. A civilization is not a mountain. It is a delicate architecture of human agreement, easily shattered. The devastation across the region was so complete that humanity literally forgot how to read and write. As the central palaces burned to the ground, the complex administrative bureaucracies that managed taxation, grain distribution, and trade collapsed along with them. The intricate, syllable-based script of the Mycenaean Greeks, known to modern scholars as Linear B, vanished entirely from the archaeological record. For roughly 400 years following the collapse, no new administrative records were carved into stone, and no accounting tablets were baked in the sun. The region plunged into a profound, silent cultural amnesia known as the Greek Dark Ages. The people who survived the apocalypse were reduced to scattered, isolated agricultural communities, struggling to pull basic sustenance from the dry earth. The sophisticated, continent-spanning administrative systems of their ancestors were replaced by the harsh, immediate realities of localized survival. This is not just a temporary loss of technology. It is a complete severing of generational memory. When a society forgets its own written voice, the past becomes an empty room, waiting to be filled with ghosts. The survivors of this collapse lived their lives in the shadows of ruins, so massive they believed giants had built them. As the descendants of the apocalypse wandered through the overgrown, quiet landscapes of the Aegean, they encountered the decaying, colossal fortresses of their ancestors. Ruined citadel cities like Mycenae and Turin's featured defensive walls constructed from limestone boulders so gargantuan that no ordinary human could have possibly lifted them into place. Having lost the engineering knowledge, the mathematics, and the sheer manpower of the Bronze Age, the people of the Dark Ages looked at these structures and concluded they were the work of a mythical race of one-eyed behemoths. They named this architectural style Cyclopean masonry, a term still used by awestruck archaeologists today. To live among these ruins was to feel small, inferior, and deeply disconnected from a lost golden age. The landscape itself felt haunted by a forgotten majesty. It is a haunting image, a primitive society camping in the hollowed-out bones of a much greater time. Even the silent stones whispered of a power that had slipped quietly away into the dark. The ocean itself transformed from a predictable highway of prosperity into a vast, terrifying frontier. During the peak of the Bronze Age, the Mediterranean Sea was a relatively safe, well-mapped network of commercial transit. Heavy merchant ships moved confidently along the coasts, guided by the assurance of friendly, cosmopolitan harbors and established naval patrols. But after the collapse, the sea became a dark, hostile, and utterly lawless expanse. With the protective fleets gone and the major ports reduced to cinders, to set sail was to invite almost certain disaster. The water was now ruled by desperate raiders and unpredictable weather patterns that felt, to the vulnerable sailors, like the wrath of angry, vindictive gods. The ancient mariners hugged the jagged coastlines, terrified of being blown into the open, uncharted blue where no map could save them. This deep-seated fear of the deep sea permeates every single line of the ancient poem. The ocean is not merely a setting for this story. It is an active, malevolent force. It is a cold, churning intelligence that deeply resents human intrusion. The protagonist of our epic is not navigating a pristine golden age of heroes, but a terrifying, post-apocalyptic wasteland. When we strip away the romantic, sanitized veneer of the myth, we find a story deeply rooted in the historical anxiety of the Bronze Age collapse. The great king struggling to return home is, in harsh reality, a desperate warlord trying to survive in a fractured, broken world. The seas he sails are no longer safe trade routes, but chaotic waters teeming with piracy, famine, and localized violence. His ultimate goal is not the accumulation of glory, vast wealth, or the conquest of a grand empire. He is desperately fighting his way back to a tiny, rocky, agriculturally poor island, simply because it holds the only remaining fragments of his family, his identity, and his sanity. He is a traumatized survivor navigating the flooded ruins of a collapsed civilization. This perspective changes the entire emotional weight of his legendary journey. It is no longer just a sprawling tale of magical adventure. It is a story about the primal, desperate need to find a safe harbor when the rest of the world has drowned. The sheer scale of the epic presents a profound mathematical impossibility for a civilization without writing. The story we are exploring is vast, sprawling across 24 distinct books and containing over 12,000 lines of complex, highly structured verse. If you were to speak it aloud at a steady, unhurried pace, it would take roughly 24 continuous hours to reach the end. Yet, as we have seen, the civilization that birthed this narrative had completely lost the technology of writing during the Bronze Age collapse. For nearly 4 centuries, there were no scrolls, no clay tablets, and no carved stones to hold these words. The society was entirely illiterate, relying completely on the fragile architecture of the human mind to carry its history forward. This presents a staggering logistical mystery. It challenges everything we assume about the limitations of human recall and the degradation of information over time. Information usually decays like a crumbling wall, but this narrative somehow grew stronger in the dark. It is a striking realization that sometimes the most enduring monuments are built entirely out of breath and sound. For thousands of years, the world imagined a single, solitary genius hunched over a scroll. The name attached to this towering achievement of human literature has always been Homer. Classical antiquity pictured him as an elderly, blind poet, blessed by the muses, painstakingly crafting every single line of the masterpiece in a quiet room. We inherited this romantic image, treating the text as if it were a modern novel written by a singular visionary who carefully chose every adjective and verb. But scholars analyzing the ancient Greek text began to notice strange, recurring anomalies. They found different dialects of Greek, separated by hundreds of years of linguistic evolution, sitting side by side in the exact same sentence. They noticed jarring repetitions and entire blocks of text lifted and dropped into different chapters. The text did not read like the deliberate work of a single author sitting at a desk. It read like an ancient tapestry woven by countless different hands over hundreds of years. The solitary genius is a comforting illusion. The truth of how this story survived is much stranger and far more beautiful. The key to unlocking this ancient mystery was found in the rugged, isolated mountains of the Balkans. In the early 1930s, a brilliant, unconventional young scholar named Milman Parry decided that the only way to understand an ancient illiterate society was to find a modern one. He traveled to the remote highlands of Yugoslavia, a region that still harbored a living, breathing tradition of oral epic poetry. Perry did not travel light. He hauled massive, cumbersome aluminum disc recording machines, powered by heavy batteries, deep into the rural villages. He sought out the traditional illiterate singers who still entertained their communities in crowded, smoke-filled coffee houses. Perry wanted to capture the exact mechanics of how these men composed and remembered stories of war and heroism without ever reading a single word. He was not just collecting folk songs. He was building a time machine, searching for a living analog to the ancient bards of the Aegean Sea. It is a beautiful example of how science often requires us to leave the library. Sometimes, to understand the ancient dead, you must sit quietly and listen to the living. The illiterate singers demonstrated a capacity for memory that seemed entirely superhuman. Perry sat in the dim light of the taverns, started his aluminum discs spinning, and asked the men to sing their longest epics. What he recorded changed the study of literature forever. He documented bards who could sing epic poems the length of a modern novel, performing for hours upon hours over consecutive nights, without ever consulting a text. When he asked them to repeat a song a week later, they would sing the same story, but the exact wording would shift and adapt, breathing in real time. They were not reciting a rigidly memorized script. They were improvising an immensely complex narrative on the spot, weaving the story together at the speed of thought. They held tens of thousands of lines of poetry in their heads, yet they could not read their own names. What makes this so astonishing is the realization that the human brain possesses vast, untapped architectures of recall that modern society has allowed to go dormant. It is a quiet reminder that before we outsourced our memories to paper and glass, the mind was an infinite, echoing library. The secret to this impossible feat of memory is a highly sophisticated modular code. As Perry analyzed the recordings of the Yugoslavian bards and compared them to the ancient Greek text, he discovered the hidden mechanics of the epic. The bards were not memorizing individual words. They were memorizing rhythmic formulas. The poem is built out of prefabricated, interlocking phrases designed to perfectly fit the metrical beat of the song. This is why the ancient text constantly repeats specific, recognizable phrases. Dawn is always rosy-fingered. The sea is always wine-dark. The hero is always resourceful or much-enduring. These are not just poetic flourishes. They are cognitive building blocks. A bard could reach into his mental toolbox, grab a pre-measured phrase that fit the rhythm of the line, and insert it instantly while his brain formulated the next sentence. The entire epic was essentially a sprawling, rhythmic database. This is not simple memorization. It is a highly advanced form of mental software. A society without writing invented a linguistic technology to make its most precious memories indestructible. This discovery completely shatters our traditional understanding of who authored the myth. Homer was not a single historical man sitting in a quiet room with a quill. The name Homer represents an ancient, unbroken tradition of thousands of illiterate singers, passing the rhythmic code down through countless generations. Each bard who sang the story added his own breath to it, refining the formal, as preserving the ancient words and adapting the tale for the audience sitting in front of him. The story survived the apocalypse of the Bronze Age collapse not because it was hidden in a vault, but because it lived in the throat of the culture. It was sung over campfires, on rocky beaches, and in the halls of struggling kings. The text we have today is simply a frozen snapshot of a song that had been fluid and alive for centuries, captured the moment someone finally learned how to write it down. That is a deeply moving revelation. The epic is not the voice of one lonely genius. It is the chorus of an entire civilization, whispering across the dark expanse of time. The modular code was meticulously designed to preserve a very specific, agonizing kind of human experience. The complex rhythms and interlocking formulas were not created merely to entertain or to sing praises of the gods. They were forged in the Dark Ages following the collapse of a golden world, serving as a survival mechanism for a traumatized people. The epic carried the memories of how to build ships, how to offer sacrifices, and how to understand the brutal, unforgiving nature of the sea. But more than that, it carried the emotional weight of absolute loss. The rhythmic database was an ancient vessel constructed to hold the profound grief of a massive, devastating war and the terrifying uncertainty of the voyage that followed. The bards wove this intricate tapestry of sound so that the suffering of their ancestors would never be erased by the silent, advancing years. It is a profound testament to the resilience of our species. We do not just endure our tragedies. We turn them into music, ensuring they outlive the empires that caused them. This sprawling, musical architecture of memory centers entirely on a man who desperately wished to be forgotten by history. The grand, sweeping mechanics of the epic, the formulas, the rhythm, and the thousands of voices passing it down, were all deployed to preserve the story of someone who never wanted to leave his island in the first place. Before he ever faced the wrath of the sea, the mythical monsters, or the dark abyss of the underworld, he was simply a father standing in a rocky field, trying to avoid a conflict that was not his to fight. The vast machinery of the poem exists to document the struggle of a mortal clinging tightly to his quiet, ordinary life. This is the profound paradox of the legend. The greatest epic ever sung begins with a desperate attempt to avoid greatness. This musical code was designed to preserve a specific kind of trauma. And that trauma begins with a man who never wanted to leave home in the first place. The ancient world is preparing for a war that will consume an entire generation. Across the glittering expanse of the Aegean Sea, a massive, unprecedented military machine is quietly assembling. Hundreds of kings and chieftains are pulling their ships onto the beaches, sharpening their bronze, and calling in ancient debts. The call to arms is absolute, demanding that every able-bodied leader honor an old oath to retrieve a stolen queen. It is a mobilization of force that the Mediterranean has never seen before, a tidal wave of armor and ambition gathering on the horizon. Yet, on the small, rocky island of Ithaca, the local king feels no thrill of impending glory. He has just welcomed his firstborn son into the world, and the quiet warmth of his home holds far more gravity than the distant promises of honor or plunder. What makes this so captivating is the immediate rejection of the typical heroic archetype. This is not a man eager to carve his name into history. It is a man who recognizes that history is a meat grinder, and he simply wishes to step out of its path. To avoid the draft, the great tactician decides to sacrifice his own dignity. When the black ships of the recruiters finally appear on the horizon, cutting through the calm waters toward Ithaca, the king knows that simple refusal is not an option. To deny the call to arms would be treason, inviting the wrath of the combined Greek armies upon his unprotected island. He cannot fight them, and he cannot outrun them. Instead, he chooses a strategy of radical humiliation. He decides to convince the recruiters that his mind has completely fractured, rendering him utterly useless to a military campaign. He strips away his royal authority, dresses in the ragged clothes of a peasant, and descends into the dirt of his own fields. It is a striking realization that the man famous for his brilliant mind first uses that brilliance to feign absolute mental collapse. Sometimes, the most profound act of rebellion is pretending you are broken. A scene of deliberate, calculated absurdity unfolds in the coastal dirt. As the Greek commanders walk up the path from their ships, they find the king of Ithaca behaving like a deeply disturbed madman. He has yoked two entirely mismatched animals to his wooden plow, an ox and a donkey. Because the animals possess vastly different strengths and gaits, the plow pulls unevenly, tearing chaotic gashes into the soil. Behind this bizarre team, the king walks with a heavy sack, reaching his hand in and casting white crystals into the open earth. He is sowing his own fertile fields with salt, an act that guarantees nothing will ever grow there again. To an ancient agricultural society, this is the ultimate manifestation of insanity, the deliberate destruction of the very soil that keeps a family alive. The imagery is unforgettable, painting a portrait of a mind completely untethered from reality. Yet, beneath the ragged clothes and the chaotic movements, a cold, calculating intellect is watching the recruiters, waiting to see if they believe the performance. It is a dangerous game of psychological chess, played in the dust. The military machine is deeply cynical, and it does not accept madness easily. The delegation of recruiters is led by a man named Palames, a Greek commander who is just as cunning and observant as the king he has come to collect. Palames stands at the edge of the ruined field, watching the erratic movements of the ox and the donkey, and observing the king throwing salt into the wind. He studies the performance closely, searching for the slightest crack in the facade. He understands that a man facing 10 years of brutal warfare might go to extraordinary lengths to stay comfortably by his own hearth. The commanders know that they need this specific king. They need his tactical mind, his ability to speak, and his capacity for deception if they are to breach the massive walls of Troy. Palames decides that he cannot simply walk away based on visual evidence alone. He must force the king's hidden intellect to reveal itself through an impossible, agonizing choice. It is a chilling reminder of the cold calculus of war. An army does not care about the health of a man's soul, as long as his sword arm can still swing. A brutal, silent test of humanity is placed directly in the path of the plow. Without saying a word, Palame steps into the house and emerges carrying the king's infant son, Telemachus. He walks out into the center of the ruined field and gently places the baby down in the loose, salty dirt, directly in the trajectory of the approaching plow blade. He then steps back and simply watches. If the king is truly insane, completely lost to the void of a shattered mind, he will not recognize the child and will drive the heavy wooden blade straight over him. If he is faking, his biological imperative as a father will override his desperate desire to avoid the war. The tension in the field becomes thick and suffocating. The ox and the donkey pull the heavy wooden blade closer to the small, fragile bundle in the dirt. It is a moment of pure, terrifying suspense, stripping away all the grand rhetoric of honor and duty. The fate of an epic hinges entirely on the space between a sharp piece of wood and a sleeping child. The mask of madness shatters in a fraction of a second. Just as the heavy plow is about to strike the infant, the chaotic movements of the farmer suddenly stop. The king violently yanks the reins, pulling the mismatched beasts hard to the side, lifting the heavy wooden blade safely out of the dirt and away from his son. In that single, desperate, protective motion, the performance is entirely destroyed. He drops the reins and gathers his child from the dust, brushing the salt from the baby's clothes. He stands up, looking at Palames, and the feigned emptiness in his eyes is replaced by a cold, devastating clarity. The recruiters have won. The ruse has failed. He has proven his sanity by prioritizing love over his own freedom. The deep tragedy of this moment is that his very humanity is the exact mechanism used to enslave him to the war effort. A man's greatest strength is often the precise handle by which the world drags him into the dark. This primal act of parental love defines the entire sprawling journey that follows. When we understand this quiet, desperate prologue in the dusty fields of Ithaca, the vast mythological epic transforms into something deeply intimate. The king who sets sail with the armada is not an adventurer seeking to conquer the unknown. He is a hostage to duty, a father ripped away from his newborn son by the violent currents of his era. Every monster he faces, every storm he endures, and every temptation he rejects over the next 20 years is fueled by the memory of the child he saved in the dirt. His legendary resilience is not born from a desire to be a hero. It is born from an absolute, bone-deep refusal to die before he can hold his family again. The foundation of this monumental story is not built on martial glory or divine intervention. It is built on the quiet, gravitational pull of home. He survives the 10-year meat grinder of Troy. But the true nightmare begins when he sets sail for home, and the map simply runs out. The journey home begins with a catastrophic shift in the wind. After 10 brutal years of siege warfare, the Greek armada finally packs its black ships and leaves the smoldering ruins of Troy behind. The hulls of the galleys are heavy with bronze, gold, and the exhausted weight of traumatized men who simply want to see their families again. At first, the route is entirely familiar, hugging the jagged, comforting coastlines of the Aegean Sea, navigating the well-known archipelago that leads back toward the Ionian Islands. But as the fleet of Ithaca attempts to round Cape Malea, the treacherous and violently windy southern tip of the Peloponnese Peninsula, the weather turns against them. A massive, shrieking gale descends from the north, ripping their linen sails from the masts and snapping their wooden oars like dry twigs. The ships are caught in an unforgiving, churning current, blown violently past the safety of the island of Cythera and out into the terrifying expanse of the open sea for 9 consecutive days. It is a stark, humbling reminder of human frailty against the monumental scale of nature. A single, unpredictable shift in the atmosphere can rewrite the entire trajectory of a human life in a matter of seconds. Ancient navigation relied entirely on the comforting sight of solid ground. To truly understand the sheer, paralyzing terror of being blown off course in the late Bronze Age, we must understand how these ancient mariners interacted with the ocean. They did not possess magnetic compasses, sophisticated brass astrolabes, or complex mathematical charts of the deep sea. Instead, they practiced a method of travel known as coastal hugging. The ship captain kept the shoreline firmly in his peripheral vision at all times, navigating by recognizing the dark silhouette of a specific mountain peak or the gentle curvature of a familiar, welcoming bay. The land was their only anchor to reality, a continuous thread guiding them through the chaotic water. To lose sight of the coast was considered an almost guaranteed death sentence. Without a visible horizon of dirt and rock to orient themselves, an ancient crew was instantly swallowed by a vast, featureless blue void where every direction looked exactly the same. It is akin to a child keeping a hand pressed firmly against the wall while walking through a pitch-black house. To let go of the wall is to step off the edge of the known world. The ocean at the center of the Mediterranean is a cold, indifferent intelligence. Away from the safe, sunlit shallows of the coast, the water transforms into something deeply alien and profoundly isolating. The Mediterranean is an incredibly deep basin, plunging thousands of meters down into a crushing, sunless abyss. When an ancient ship was blown into this open expanse, the water beneath their thin wooden hull turned a profound, suffocating shade of dark indigo. The waves moved differently out here, shaped by powerful, invisible thermal currents rather than the predictable drag of the shoreline. The sailors found themselves completely isolated in a hostile environment that was fundamentally not built to sustain human life. They were entirely at the mercy of the wind, the heavy rain, and the rapidly depleting rations of fresh water stored in fragile clay amphorae below the deck. There is a deep, primal vulnerability in being surrounded by nothing but churning water and an empty, sweeping sky. It is a humbling realization that the ocean does not actively hate the sailors upon it. It is simply, terrifyingly indifferent to their survival. The narrative geography fractures completely the moment the storm subsides. In the first few chapters of the epic, the locations are firmly grounded in historical, measurable reality. Troy is a real archaeological site built of stone and mud. The coast of Egypt, where other returning kings wash ashore, is a tangible, geographical place. But on the 10th day of being blown blindly off course, the ships of Ithaca arrive on shores that begin to defy the very laws of nature. The poem quietly crosses an invisible boundary, transitioning from the known world of commerce and war into a surreal, hallucinatory landscape. The fleet encounters floating islands of polished bronze, lands locked in perpetual, freezing fog where the dead linger, and strange shores where the sun never sets at all. The recognizable, comforting landmarks of the Aegean are replaced by shifting, dreamlike topographies that operate on the fluid logic of a nightmare. It is as if the storm blew them through a fragile membrane, separating the waking world from the deep, irrational currents of the subconscious. The edge of the map is always the precise line where history exhausts itself and mythology begins to bloom. Modern historians have spent centuries trying to pin these ghost lands to a physical map. The human mind is deeply uncomfortable with the concept of the unmappable. For generations, brilliant scholars, geographers, and passionate explorers have obsessed over the ancient text, attempting to trace the exact physical route of the lost fleet. They meticulously measure the wind speeds mentioned in the poem and calculate the maximum nautical miles. A Bronze Age galley could travel in 9 days of drifting. Some cartographers confidently place the mythical islands off the coast of North Africa or hidden within the rocky coves of Sicily. Others argue that the hero was blown completely out of the Mediterranean basin, pushed past the Pillars of Hercules, and into the freezing, churning waters of the Atlantic Ocean, or perhaps even as far north as the Baltic Sea. The theories are endless and highly debated, resulting in hundreds of wildly conflicting maps, each attempting to force a rigid mathematical grid onto a deeply poetic journey. It is a poignant, almost melancholic endeavor. We possess an endless, aching desire to organize the terrifying unknown into neat, comprehensible coordinates. The fleet did not sail into a literal ocean, but into the collective anxieties of the ancient mariner. The reason the route can never be accurately mapped is that the geography of the poem is primarily psychological, not physical. The surreal landscapes and the terrifying entities the crew encounters are brilliant externalizations of real, historical maritime fears. The obstacles they will soon face are born from the very real, physical threats of starvation, jagged hidden reefs, hostile foreign tribes, and the creeping, insidious madness of long-term isolation at sea. The ocean they are navigating is not a body of water that can be plotted with a compass or a sextant. It is the vast, uncharted territory of human vulnerability. By removing the familiar coastlines, the ancient bards forced their listeners to confront the absolute limits of human endurance when stripped of all earthly comforts and navigational aids. This is not just a geographical detour into the weird. It is a profound exploration of the dark waters that exist within the human mind. The most terrifying oceans we cross are often the ones churning silently beneath our own thoughts. The first stop in this terrifying, unknown territory isn't a monster. It's a plant that destroys the very concept of home. The shoreline of the unknown offers a deceptively gentle welcome. After surviving the terrifying, violent chaos of the open ocean, the battered fleet washes ashore on a tranquil, unassuming coastline. The wind, which had been shrieking through the rigging for over a week, suddenly drops to a warm, gentle breeze. 3 men are sent inland to scout the territory and make contact with the locals. They do not find hostile armies, towering fortifications, or monstrous beasts. Instead, they encounter a peaceful, quiet society known simply as the Lotus Eaters. These people offer the exhausted Greek scouts a native, honey-sweet flowering plant to eat. The effect is immediate and devastating. The scouts instantly lose all desire to return to their ships, their families, or their kingdom. They sit down in the dirt, weeping with a strange, hollow joy, wishing only to remain on this quiet beach and eat the flower forever. It is a quiet, terrifying realization that the most dangerous traps do not always involve violence. Sometimes, oblivion arrives disguised as absolute peace. The atmosphere of the island is heavy with a strange, narcotic stillness. Imagine the profound silence of this new landscape. After a decade of roaring battlefields, the snapping timber of ships, and the panicked shouts of drowning men, the sudden quiet of the lotus fields feels thick and enveloping. The air is heavily perfumed, lacking the sharp, biting salt of the Aegean Sea. The local inhabitants carry no spears and build no walls. They simply wander through the lush, overgrown valleys, lost in a perpetual, smiling haze, untouched by the frantic ambitions of the outside world. The landscape itself seems to breathe at a slower, much more deliberate rhythm. It actively invites the exhausted sailors to simply lie down in the warm grass, close their eyes, and let the heavy burden of their armor slip away into the soil. It is a perfect, insidious trap designed specifically for the weary. A tired body will always mistake an eternal sleep for a well-deserved rest. The intoxicating sweetness of the flower is rooted in authentic ancient botany. For centuries, readers assumed the lotus was merely a magical plot device, a fictional fruit invented to test the hero's resolve. But historians and botanists have long searched the North African and Mediterranean coasts for the real-world inspiration behind the myth. Many point directly to Nymphea caerulea, the blue Egyptian water lily. This aquatic plant grew abundantly in the ancient world and was deeply revered for its psychoactive properties. When steeped in wine or chewed raw, the lily releases apomorphine and nuciferine, mild alkaloids that induce a state of deeply relaxed, euphoric apathy. Our rest suggests the ancient storytellers were describing the opium poppy, a plant well known to Bronze Age traders for its powerful, narcotic, pain-numbing effects. The ancient bards were not inventing a magical curse. They were describing real biochemistry. A simple arrangement of carbon and nitrogen molecules holds the power to completely dismantle a human identity. The desire to eat the lotus is born from a decade of unimaginable trauma. To understand why these hardened, elite warriors succumb so instantly to a simple flower, we must look at the dark, violent history they carry with them. These men are not fresh-faced explorers on a light-hearted adventure. They are deeply traumatized veterans of a 10-year siege. They have spent a decade sleeping in muddy trenches, watching their closest friends die violently, and committing horrific acts of slaughter in the burning ashes of Troy. Their nervous systems are completely shattered by the endless adrenaline of war. They are suffering from what modern psychology would immediately recognize as severe post-traumatic stress and profound post-war depression. The sweet flower does not just taste good. It offers a chemical escape from the unbearable, crushing weight of their own memories. We often judge the crew for their weakness in forgetting their homes, but we underestimate the vast gravity of their grief. A mind that has witnessed too much destruction will inevitably crave a quiet, dreamless dark. To lose the memory of home is to lose the compass of the human soul. In the ancient worldview, the concept of the homecoming, the nostos, was the ultimate defining purpose of a mortal life. Returning home was not merely about walking through a familiar physical doorway. It was about reclaiming one's rightful place in the complex fabric of a community, a family lineage, and a historical timeline. The botanical chemistry of the lotus attacks this core human identity with terrifying precision. By dissolving the memory of their waiting wives, their growing children, and their native soil, the plant effectively untethers the sailors from time itself. Without a past to honor or a future to strive toward, they become adrift in a permanent, meaningless present. They are transformed into ghosts before their bodies have even died. A life without a destination is merely a shadow play. We are defined not just by where we stand, but by the distant shores we are desperately trying to reach. The true antagonist of this encounter is the seductive comfort of giving up. Odysseus, the tactician, recognizes that this fragrant flower represents an existential threat far greater than any armed battalion or raging storm. If a man is killed on the battlefield, his physical story ends, but his honor and his memory survive in the songs of his people. If a man chooses the lotus, he voluntarily erases his own narrative. He becomes a hollow, smiling shell, sitting comfortably on a beach while the world moves on without him. The profound apathy induced by the plant strips away the fundamental human drive to progress, to rebuild, and to love. The greatest danger to a weary traveler is not the monsters waiting in the dark, but the sudden, overwhelming belief that the journey is no longer worth the effort. It is a striking metaphor for the subtle, creeping dangers of deep depression. The heaviest chains are not forged from iron, but from the sudden conviction that nothing matters anymore. The rescue of the crew requires an act of painful, necessary cruelty. The king of Ithaca does not sit down in the sweet grass and try to reason with men who are high on narcotics and apathy. He understands that the sickness of the lotus cannot be cured with gentle persuasion or logical debate. He relies on sheer, uncompromising physical force. He wades into the smiling crowd, grabbing his weeping, resistant men by the shoulders, and physically drags them away from their artificial paradise. He brings them back to the dark wooden galleys in heavy bronze chains, binding them tightly beneath the rowing benches, so they cannot throw themselves overboard to swim back to the flowers. He forces them to pick up the heavy, splintered oars and row back out into the terrifying, unpredictable ocean. He takes away their manufactured peace in order to save their authentic lives. Leadership in the aftermath of tragedy often requires forcing people to endure the pain of reality. Healing is rarely a comfortable process. It is usually a forceful dragging back into the harsh, demanding light of day. They escaped the threat of apathy, but their next stop would introduce them to a very physical, very brutal reality, born from the bones of giants. The coastline of the one-eyed giants offers a brutal awakening from the gentle, narcotic haze of the lotus. Leaving the tranquil beaches of the flower-eaters behind, the lost fleet sails into a much harsher, unforgiving landscape. They drop anchor in a shrouded cove and gaze upon a wild, uncultivated island. There are no plowed fields, no harbors, and no signs of organized human society. Only vast flocks of untended sheep wandering among massive, gaping cave mouths in the rocky cliffs. The king of Ithaca, driven by an insatiable curiosity and a desperate need for provisions, takes a small detachment of his best men to explore the largest of these caverns. They step out of the bright Mediterranean sun and into the cool, damp dark of a massive stone dwelling. They find colossal racks of drying cheeses and vats of milk so large they defy human proportions. They have unwittingly walked directly into the lair of Polyphemus, the Cyclops, a monstrous shepherd who does not view the sailors as honored guests, but as an unexpected source of protein. It is a chilling shift in the natural order. For the first time in their lives, the apex predators of the Greek military find themselves at the absolute bottom of the food chain. The cavern rapidly transforms into an impenetrable prison of stone and shadow. When the giant returns from the pastures, he drives his massive flocks into the cave and seals the entrance with a solid slab of rock. The ancient poem notes that not even 22 strong, four-wheeled wagons could move this boulder from the earth. The The sailors are trapped in the dim, echoing dark, surrounded by the smell of animal fleece and the terrifying realization of their own physical insignificance. The giant, possessing a single, massive eye in the center of his forehead, discovers the intruders and methodically begins to consume them, smashing two men against the floor like helpless insects before eating them raw. The bronze swords of the veterans are completely useless against a creature of this scale, and killing him in his sleep would doom them all, for only the monster possesses the strength to roll away the stone door. The raw, primal terror of being hunted in a confined space strips away all the complex tactics of ancient warfare. Sometimes, human strength is entirely eclipsed by the sheer, brutal mass of the physical world. The escape requires a masterclass in psychological manipulation and linguistic deception. Knowing that brute force will only result in their slaughter, the desperate king relies on the only weapon he has left, his mind. He approaches the giant and offers him a skin of incredibly potent, unmixed wine, a vintage so strong it was meant to be diluted with 20 parts water. As the monster drinks heavily and slips into a drunken stupor, he asks for his victim's name. The king replies that his name is Nobody. When the giant finally collapses, the surviving men heat a massive wooden stake in the embers of the fire and drive it directly into the monster's single eye. The blinded giant roars in agony, waking the other cyclopes on the island who rush to the outside of the sealed cave, asking who is harming him. The blinded creature screams back into the night, "Nobody is killing me. Nobody is hurting me." Hearing this, the other giants shrug and walk away, leaving Polyphemus to his isolated agony. The men eventually escape by clinging to the bellies of the giant's sheep as they are let out to graze in the morning. It is a brilliant, terrifying sequence of survival. A simple twist of language can be far sharper and vastly more effective than any bronze blade. For centuries, the terrifying monster of the cave was dismissed as a pure nightmare of the ancient imagination. The Cyclops became the ultimate symbol of barbaric, uncivilized violence, a boogeyman invented to frighten children and warn sailors against exploring unknown shores. The idea of a race of giant, one-eyed humanoids walking the earth seemed biologically impossible, a clear indicator that the myth had finally severed all ties with reality. But the earth keeps its own meticulous records, buried silently in the dust and rock of the Mediterranean islands. When modern paleontologists and geologists began to excavate the caves of Sicily, Crete, and Cyprus, they were not looking for mythological monsters. They were searching for evidence of the Pleistocene epoch, mapping the deep history of ancient mammals. What they pulled from the dark soil completely altered our understanding of where the ancient Greeks found their nightmares. The truth waiting in the dirt was far stranger than simple fiction. The monsters were not invented out of thin air. They were dug out of the ground. The soil of these isolated islands holds the fossilized remains of ancient, stranded giants. During the last ice age, sea levels across the globe were significantly lower, exposing land bridges that connected the European and African continents to the Mediterranean islands. Massive prehistoric elephants migrated across these bridges, seeking new grazing lands. But as the ice melted and the oceans rose, the land bridges disappeared beneath the waves, trapping the elephants on small, isolated patches of rock. Over hundreds of thousands of years, an evolutio phenomenon known as insular dwarfism took hold. Because the islands had limited food resources, the elephants gradually shrank in size to survive, evolving into a distinct species known as Paleoxodon falconry. These creatures roamed the islands for millennia before finally going extinct, leaving their massive bones scattered in the coastal caves where they sought shelter. Evolution is a quiet, patient sculptor, reshaping life to fit the shrinking boundaries of its world. The skull of a prehistoric elephant harbors a chilling, undeniable anatomical illusion. When a modern paleontologist looks at an elephant skull, they immediately recognize the complex structures required to support tusks, heavy molars, and a massive trunk. But the central feature of the skull is a massive, gaping hole situated right in the middle of the forehead. To a trained scientist, this is clearly the nasal cavity, the large opening where the muscular trunk attaches to the bone. The actual eye sockets are relatively small and pushed far to the sides of the skull. But to a person who has never seen a living elephant, and who possesses no formal training in comparative anatomy, the skull looks entirely different. It looks remarkably human, yet terrifyingly large. And that massive central hole looks exactly like a single, giant eye socket staring blankly into the dark. It is a haunting trick of biology. Our minds are desperately wired to find human faces in the shadows, even in the decaying bones of beasts. Ancient Greek sailors walked directly into these seaside caves and stumbled upon the bones of the earth. Imagine the experience of a Bronze Age mariner seeking shelter from a storm in a dark cavern on the coast of Sicily. He digs a pit for his fire, and his bronze shovel strikes something hard. He pulls away the dirt to reveal a massive skull, twice the size of a human head, staring up at him with a single, massive eye hole. He finds giant femurs and ribs scattered in the dark. He applies a perfectly logical, rational deduction based on the evidence before him. He has found a giant. It lived in this cave, and it only had one eye. He carries this terrifying discovery back to his ship, and the story spreads across the trading ports of the Aegean. The myth of the Cyclops is born not from ignorance, but from a genuine, prehistoric archaeological discovery. It changes the way we view the ancient storytellers. Mythology is often just the beautiful, terrifying result of ancient people trying to do science with missing pieces. The monsters of the ancient world are often just echoes of a much older, forgotten reality. When the battered crew of Ithaca finally rows away from the island of the Cyclops, they are leaving behind a terror that was deeply rooted in the physical landscape of their era. They survived the crushing weight of the stones and the brutal reality of the food chain. But the ocean is vast, and it contains dangers that do not rely on sheer size or brute strength to destroy a man. The king and his men have proven they can outsmart a physical giant, using logic and language to escape the dark. But they are sailing toward an island where logic itself is weaponized, and where the mind can be unraveled without a single drop of blood being spilled. The crew survives the physical brutality of the Cyclops, only to face a much more insidious threat: a chemist who knows exactly how to break the human mind. The next shoreline offers a beauty that feels remarkably deliberate and dangerously inviting. After escaping the brutal, cavernous dark of the Cyclops, the surviving ships drag themselves onto the pristine beaches of an island named Ia. The exhausted scouting party moves inland through dense, fragrant woods and discovers a clearing bathed in warm sunlight. In the center sits a beautiful house built of smooth, polished stone. The grounds are guarded not by armed soldiers, but by mountain wolves and heavy-maned lions that do not attack. Instead, the wild beasts rise on their hind legs and gently fawn over the terrified sailors like domestic dogs greeting their masters. From inside the stone walls, a woman's voice rises in a beautiful, soaring song, accompanied by the rhythmic clatter of a heavy wooden loom. The enchantress Circe opens her shining doors and invites the starving, war-weary men inside to rest. She seats them on beautiful chairs and mixes them a heavy potion of cheese, barley, pale honey, and dark Pramnian wine. A warm hearth can be the most effective snare in the wild. The comforting meal turns instantly into a nightmare of physical and mental degradation. As the sailors eagerly consume the sweet, heavy wine, the enchantress steps forward and strikes each of them sharply with a wooden wand. The transformation is immediate and grotesque. The men suddenly lose the ability to speak, their voices devolving into panicked, guttural grunts. Bristles erupt across their skin, and they drop violently to all fours, their bodies reshaping into the heavy, muscular forms of swine. Circe calmly herds them out the door and locks them in muddy sties, throwing acorns and mast into the dirt for them to eat. The poem notes a devastating detail regarding this transformation. The men had the heads, voices, bristles, and bodies of pigs, but their minds remained entirely human. They were trapped inside the flesh of beasts, fully aware of their own tragic degradation, weeping silently in the mud. There is a profound terror in being locked inside a failing vessel, while the mind watches helplessly. To understand this terrifying encounter, we must carefully strip away the veil of ancient magic and look closely at the soil. We are conditioned by centuries of fairy tales to view witches as supernatural beings possessing divine or demonic powers. We imagine spells cast out of thin air, defying the physical laws of the universe. But in the ancient Greek vocabulary, Circe is explicitly described using words related to pharmaca, meaning drugs, herbs, and potions. She is not manipulating the fabric of reality with a magic wand. She is extracting powerful, invisible compounds from the roots and leaves of the island. The ancient storytellers were not inventing a supernatural curse to entertain their listeners. They were recording the terrifying effects of real, potent biochemistry. To an ancient observer lacking the vocabulary of molecules and neurotransmitters, the sudden, violent alteration of a human mind through a brewed liquid is indistinguishable from sorcery. Magic is simply the word we use for chemistry we do not yet understand. The Mediterranean basin is heavily populated with native plants that possess terrifying psychoactive defenses. When modern botanists examine the flora native to the region, they find several perfect candidates for Circe's dark wine. The most prominent is Datura stramonium, commonly known as Jimson weed or the thorn apple. This unassuming, leafy plant produces beautiful, trumpet-shaped white flowers, but its tissues are flooded with powerful anticholinergic tropine alkaloids, specifically scopolamine and atropine. These chemical compounds are evolutionary defense mechanisms designed to severely disrupt the nervous systems of animals that try to eat the plant. When ingested by a human, these alkaloids rapidly cross the blood-brain barrier and block acetylcholine, a critical neurotransmitter responsible for muscle movement, memory creation, and cognitive function. The nervous system is essentially hijacked and plunged into absolute chaos. A fragile leaf can hold more destructive power than a battalion of armed men. The clinical symptoms of this specific botanical poisoning perfectly mirror the ancient curse of the swine. When a person ingests a high dose of tropine alkaloids, the medical effects are severe and deeply disturbing. The victim is plunged into a state of acute, terrifying delirium. They experience profound amnesia, completely forgetting who they are or how they arrived in their current location. Because the chemicals dry out the mucous membranes and paralyze the vocal cords, the victim loses the ability to form coherent human speech, producing only dry, guttural noises. As the delirium deepens, victims become highly disoriented, often dropping to their hands and knees, picking at imaginary objects on the floor, and crawling blindly through the dirt. If an ancient sailor watched his heavily armed comrades drink a potion, lose the power of speech, forget their own names, and begin crawling naked in the mud while grunting, he would draw a very logical conclusion. To a frightened ancient mind, a man behaving exactly like an animal has literally devolved into a beast. The ancient narrative provides a highly specific botanical cure for the poisoning. When the king of Ithaca learns of his men's fate, he draws his bronze sword and rushes toward the stone house, fully intending to kill the sorceress. But he is intercepted in the woods by the god Hermes, who offers him a protective charm. The god reaches into the dark earth and pulls up a strange, wild plant. It has a heavy, pitch-black root and a flower as brilliantly white as milk. The gods call it moly, and it is described as being incredibly difficult for a mortal man to dig up. Hermes instructs the king to take this flower and drop it secretly into Circe's poisoned wine before drinking it. The king follows the instructions, consumes the heavy wine, and when the enchantress strikes him with her wand, nothing happens. His mind remains clear, his body remains his own, and he draws his sword, forcing the terrified chemist to her knees. Survival often hinges on knowing exactly which route to pull from the dark earth. Modern pharmacology has identified a flawless real-world candidate for this mythical white flower. For centuries, scholars assumed the moly plant was a pure invention of the gods. But in the mid-20th century, a Russian pharmacologist noted the remarkable similarities between the mythical cure and a very real, delicate white flower that grows in the region, Galanthus nivalis, the common snowdrop. The bulb of the snowdrop contains a powerful, naturally occurring alkaloid called galantamine. In modern medicine, galantamine is an acetylcholinesterase inhibitor. Its specific biological function is to stop the breakdown of acetylcholine in the brain, keeping the neural pathways open and active. It is the exact chemical antagonist to the tropine alkaloids found in the datura plant. If a person ingests galantamine, it actively blocks and reverses the delirium, amnesia, and paralysis caused by the poison. Today, this exact chemical is synthesized and used to treat the cognitive decline of Alzheimer's disease. The ancient poem contains a perfectly accurate medical prescription, hidden in plain sight for 3,000 years. The legendary sorceress is revealed not as a monster, but as a master chemist holding absolute power over her environment. When we view Circe through the lens of botany rather than magic, she becomes a deeply fascinating, fiercely intelligent figure. She is a woman living entirely alone on an isolated island, surrounded by the constant threat of violent, heavily armed raiding parties washing up on her shores. She does not need a fortress of stone, and she does not need to wield a heavy bronze spear. She uses her profound understanding of the local biochemistry to effortlessly disarm and neutralize violent invaders without ever drawing a blade. She turns the natural world into an impenetrable defense system, using the subtle power of alkaloids to humble the greatest warriors of the age. It changes how we perceive power in the ancient world. The mind that understands the earth is far more dangerous than the hand that simply holds a sword. The warlord conquers the chemist, but the price for her navigational guidance is a terrifying set of instructions. Odysseus remains on the island for an entire year, recovering from the traumas of the sea while his men, restored to their human forms, feast and rest. But the inevitable pull of home eventually forces him to ask Circe for the safest route back to Ithaca. The master chemist delivers a crushing revelation. She tells him that to find his way home, he cannot simply sail back the way he came. The winds will not allow it, and the map has fundamentally changed. To find the correct currents, he must consult the spirit of a blind prophet who is no longer living. He must sail his wooden ships into the freezing fog at the very edge of the ocean, beach them on the dark shores of the underworld, and pour blood into the dirt. Odysseus conquers the witch with chemistry, but to find his way home, she tells him he must do something no mortal has ever survived. He must sail off the edge of life itself. The ancient conception of the afterlife was not a landscape of fire and punishment, but a vast and terrifyingly quiet gray shore. To reach the edge of the world, the ship of Ithaca sails directly out of the warming currents of the Mediterranean and into a region the ancient Greeks called the lands of the Cimmerians. The poem describes a geography shrouded in perpetual, heavy mist, a place where the sun never breaches the dense canopy of fog. The crew pulls their wooden vessel onto a damp, sunless beach of decaying poplar trees and drooping willows. This is the entrance to the underworld. It is fundamentally different from modern theological concepts of hell, which rely on the active torture of the wicked. In the Bronze Age mind, death was not a judgment, but a slow, agonizing fade. It was a realm of endless, suffocating boredom, where the souls of the departed wandered aimlessly as weightless shadows. It is a world like an old, treasured photograph left exposed to the sun, slowly bleaching out until nothing remains but faint, unrecognizable outlines. To be dead in the ancient world was simply to be a shadow, waiting eternally for a voice in the dark. Communication across the impenetrable boundary of death required a heavy, visceral currency. Circe's precise instructions reveal the dark mechanics of ancient necromancy. Odysseus draws his bronze sword and digs a square trench deep into the damp earth. He pours a sequence of careful libations into the dirt, honey mixed with milk, sweet wine, and clear water, sprinkling the edges with white barley. Finally, he takes a black ram and a black ewe, turning their heads downward toward the dark earth, and cuts their throats over the pit. As the hot, dark blood pools in the trench, the ground begins to shift. Countless ghosts of brides, young men, and old warriors swarm out from the gloom of Erebus, driven by a desperate, frantic need to drink the blood. They are drawn to the physical heat and the vital, biological energy of the fluid. The king must sit by the pit with his drawn sword, physically fighting off the swirling masses of the dead, reserving the blood for the blind prophet. The blood acts as a temporary battery, a momentary surge of electrical current that allows a fading recording to play back one last time. The dead do not possess infinite wisdom. They possess an infinite, aching hunger to simply feel alive for one more second. This mythological descent is anchored firmly in the physical architecture of a real, historical temple in Western Greece. While the poem frames the underworld as a distant, unreachable shore, the ancient Greeks actually built physical structures designed specifically to facilitate this exact ritual. The most famous was the Necromantion of Acheron, a sprawling stone sanctuary built on a hill overlooking the confluence of 3 dark rivers in Epirus. Ancient pilgrims desperate to speak with their deceased loved ones would travel for weeks to reach this solemn, isolated complex. The priests of the temple did not rely on magic. They utilized a highly calculated regimen of sensory deprivation and dietary control. Pilgrims were locked in pitch-black, subterranean stone chambers for days at a time, fed only a specific diet of broad beans, pork, and oysters, which modern toxicologists suggest may have induced mild hallucinatory states. It was a machine built of stone and darkness, designed to systematically dismantle the waking mind until it was fragile enough to see ghosts. Sometimes the underworld is not a place we travel to, but a frequency we tune our exhausted minds to hear. The architecture of the ancient oracle was deliberately engineered to manipulate sound and distort perception. When modern archaeologists excavated the ruined depths of the Necromantian, they discovered a complex, highly sophisticated subterranean environment. The central chamber was carved deep into the bedrock, supported by massive stone arches designed to eliminate all natural light and control the flow of sound. Researchers found remnants of large, heavy bronze wheels and sophisticated acoustic corridors winding through the dark. The priests likely used these hidden mechanics to simulate the heavy, groaning movement of tectonic plates and to project disembodied voices through the cavernous dark. When a physically exhausted, chemically altered pilgrim finally stepped into the central acoustic chamber to pour their offering of animal blood, the psychological manipulation was absolute. The temple functioned as a massive, earthen amplifier, turning the quietest whisper of the priests into the booming, echoing voice of a lost ancestor. The line between a genuine haunting and a carefully constructed acoustic environment is often lost in the desperate human desire to be heard. Among the swarming masses of the ancient dead, the warlord encounters a deeply intimate and entirely unexpected tragedy. As Odysseus sits by the trench of blood, holding his heavy sword against the pressing tide of spirits, he recognizes a figure stepping out of the dense fog. It is Anticlea, his own mother. When he left the rocky shores of Ithaca 10 years earlier to fight in the Trojan War, she was alive and well, managing the estates of the palace. Seeing her in the gloom is a devastating shock, a realization that time has continued to carve its violent path through his family while he was lost at sea. She drinks the blood and speaks to him, explaining that she did not succumb to any lingering illness, nor was she struck down by the arrows of the gods. She tells him that it was simply her intense, unrelenting longing for his return that drained the life from her limbs. She is a casualty of a foreign war who never once stepped onto a battlefield, a silent victim of the vast, unforgiving distance between them. The heaviest casualties of any conflict are often those who simply sit by a cold hearth, waiting for a sail that never appears on the horizon. The ultimate cruelty of the underworld is the absolute physical impossibility of comfort. Overcome by a sudden, crushing wave of grief and guilt, Odysseus drops his bronze sword in the dirt. He steps forward toward the trench, desperate to embrace the mother he has not seen in a decade. He throws his arms around her frail form, trying to pull her close to his chest, but his arms simply pass through her. 3 times he tries to hold her, and 3 times she sifts through his desperate hands like cool smoke or a fading dream. She looks at him with deep sorrow and explains the absolute law of human mortality. When the fire of the funeral pyre destroys the sinews and the bones, the flesh is gone forever, leaving only a flitting image that cannot be held, comforted, or saved. It is the emotional equivalent of reaching out to touch a beloved reflection in a pool of water, only to watch the image shatter into cold ripples beneath your fingers. The true sorrow of mortality is not that we must leave the earth, but that we lose the physical weight of those we love. The blind prophet finally steps forward to drink from the dark trench, offering a map built into Rely of warnings. Tiresias, the great seer of Thebes, approaches the pit and consumes the dark offering. He gives the king the navigational instructions he desperately needs to escape the surreal edge of the map, but the prophecy is grim. Tiresias explains that the route home is physically possible, but it is lined with impossible, agonizing choices. The king must restrain his own deep desires. He must navigate a strait flanked by monstrous geography. And most importantly, he must control the ravenous appetites of his starving crew when they eventually land on the island of the sun god. If his men touch the sacred cattle of the sun, the entire fleet will be utterly destroyed, and the king will return home a broken man, entirely alone on a borrowed ship. The prophecy is not a guaranteed ticket home, but a delicate, fragile tightrope stretched over a yawning abyss. The future is rarely a promise. It is almost always a strict and unforgiving condition. Leaving the realm of the dead requires turning one's back on the crushing gravity of the past. As Tiresias fades back into the mist, thousands of other ghosts begin to swarm the bloody trench. Their voices rise from a low whisper into an unbearable, shrieking clamor, begging to be remembered, begging to taste the blood. Odysseus is suddenly gripped by a primal, freezing terror. He becomes overwhelmed by the fear that Persephone, the queen of the dead, will send up the monstrous head of a Gorgon from the deep abyss to turn him into stone, trapping him in the gray fog forever. The sheer weight of the accumulated dead becomes too heavy for a living mind to bear. He turns his back on the trench, rushes back to his dark ship, and orders his terrified men to cast off the ropes immediately. They push the heavy hull back into the water, rowing frantically until the wind finally catches their sails, pulling them back into the current of the living world. To linger too long among the memories of the dead is to risk becoming entirely paralyzed by them. He leaves the dead behind, but to reach the living, he must navigate an ocean that is actively trying to pull him under. The most dangerous voices on the water do not belong to monsters, but to the sea itself. As the weary crew rows away from the haunting mist of the underworld, they enter a stretch of ocean where the very air seems engineered to deceive them. They are approaching the territory of the sirens, creatures long depicted as bird women or beautiful mermaids who sing an enchanting melody that lures passing ships to their doom. The legend claims that any man who hears their song will instantly throw himself into the waves, swimming desperately toward the rocky shore until his body is battered to pieces against the hidden crags. The ancient story frames this as a supernatural enchantment, a magical hijacking of human desire. But beneath the mythological veneer lies a profound understanding of maritime psychology and the deadly physical realities of navigating a difficult coastline without instruments. The sirens are a poetic translation of a very real physical threat. A beautiful sound is sometimes just the disguised edge of a sharp blade. Fog alters the physics of sound across a flat expanse of water with terrifying efficiency. In the ancient Mediterranean, sailing through heavy mist or dense sea fog was an exercise in pure, nerve-wracking blind navigation. When visual references disappear, the human brain desperately attempts to orient itself using the ears. Sound travels significantly faster and further over the surface of cold water, especially when trapped beneath a low ceiling of fog. The ambient noise of the ocean, the rhythmic crashing of waves against hollow, resonant caves, the wind whistling through jagged limestone pillars, the distant cries of sea birds, can become deeply distorted. To an exhausted, paranoid crew straining to hear the approaching crash of the surf, these distorted acoustics can easily sound like distant, inviting human voices or the beautiful hum of a lyre. The sirens represent the overwhelming, fatal temptation to steer a lost ship toward the source of a comforting sound in the dark. It is a striking realization that the mind, desperate for the familiar, will actively paint a picture of salvation over a landscape of jagged stone. To survive the trap of his own mind, the commander must become a prisoner of his own ship. Odysseus has been warned by Circe that the song of the sirens is utterly inescapable. If he hears it, his logic will fail, and he will destroy his vessel. He devises a brilliant, cold solution based entirely on physical restraint rather than moral fortitude. He takes a massive wheel of beeswax, cuts it into small pieces with his bronze sword, and kneads it until it is soft, instructing his men to push the wax deep into their own ears, rendering them entirely deaf to the world. But he leaves his own ears unplugged. He orders his deafened crew to bind his body tightly to the heavy wooden mast of the ship with thick ropes, instructing them to row relentlessly and to ignore his commands until they have safely passed the rocky shoals. As the ship glides into the foggy acoustic trap, the king hears the distorted, beautiful noise and thrashes violently against his restraints, screaming at his men to untie him. The deaf crew only rows harder. This is a profound study in the mechanics of human willpower. True discipline is often just the wisdom to recognize your own weakness and tie your hands before the temptation begins. The geography of the Mediterranean soon forces the fleeing ship into a violent, narrow bottleneck. Having survived the psychological snare of the sirens, the Black Galley approaches a physical geographical reality that still terrifies sailors today. They must pass through the Strait of Messina, a narrow, highly volatile channel of water separating the eastern tip of Sicily from the southern coast of the Italian peninsula. In the ancient world, to enter this strait was to sail directly into the jaws of an unforgiving trap. The poem personifies the two sides of this narrow channel as two distinct, inescapable monsters, Scylla and Charybdis. To steer away from one is to drift fatally into the reach of the other. The crew is forced to navigate a gauntlet where the margin of error is completely erased. The open sea is vast and terrifying, but the sudden tightening of a rocky horizon carries a deeply claustrophobic dread. Sometimes, the most dangerous place in the world is the narrow space between two solid stones. The Great Whirlpool is a masterpiece of fluid dynamics rather than a beast of the deep. On one side of the strait lies Charybdis, described by the ancient bards as a monstrous entity residing beneath a fig tree, swallowing the dark ocean down into her massive throat and vomiting it back up 3 times a day. If a ship is caught in her pull, the entire vessel and every soul on board will be dragged down into the crushing dark. This terrifying description is an incredibly accurate observation of a real-world tidal phenomenon. The Strait of Messina is a unique geographical choke point where the warm, salty currents of the Ionian Sea collide violently with the cooler, lighter waters of the Tyrrhenian Sea. As the tides shift, these conflicting currents are forced over a steeply rising and falling seabed, generating massive, churning vortices and complex tidal whirlpools. To an ancient galley powered by human oars, getting caught in this converging mass of water meant losing all steering capability. The ocean does not need teeth to consume a wooden world. It simply needs the sudden, relentless physics of a spinning current. The jagged cliffs opposite the whirlpool conceal a sudden, calculating violence. On the other side of the narrow channel looms the sheer rock face of Scylla, a monster said to possess 6 long necks, each ending in a head with triple rows of fangs. The myth states she remains hidden in her cavern, only darting her heads down to snatch 6 sailors from the deck of any ship that passes too closely beneath her cliff. Much like the whirlpool, Scylla is a mythological codification of a real maritime hazard. The Italian coast of the strait is lined with treacherous, jagged rock formations and sudden, unpredictable rogue waves that smash violently against the cliffs. If a ship steers too closely to these rocks to avoid the pull of the whirlpool, the crashing surf and the jagged shoals will easily rip men right off the deck and into the churning white water. The 6 heads of the monster represent the sudden, localized, and entirely unavoidable loss of life that occurs when a ship scrapes against an unyielding coastline. Some monsters are carved not from flesh, but from sharp stone and crashing water. The ancient navigator is presented with an impossible equation of human sacrifice. As the ship enters the dark, churning water of the strait, Odysseus is forced to make a harrowing calculation. Circe had warned him that no ship can fight the pull of Charybdis. If they are caught in the whirlpool, the ship will splinter, and every single man will drown. The only way to survive the strait is to steer the vessel dangerously close to the cliff of Scylla. It is a mathematical certainty that 6 men will be snatched from the deck and eaten alive, but the ship itself and the rest of the crew will survive. The king makes the agonizing choice to steer toward the cliff. More importantly, he chooses to keep this grim calculus a complete secret from his men. He knows that if he tells them 6 of them are about to die, they will drop their oars in panic. The ship will drift into the whirlpool, and all will be lost. He paces the deck in his heavy bronze armor, watching in silence as the ship glides under the shadow of the rock. Leadership is often just the terrible math of choosing who will not survive. The physical escape from the strait creates a profound, invisible fracture within the remaining crew. Just as the ship passes the cliff, 6 of the strongest oarsmen are suddenly ripped screaming into the air, vanishing into the rocky crags above. The poem describes their legs and arms dangling as they are pulled into the cavern, calling out the king's name for the very last time. Odysseus watches them die, knowing he actively chose their fate, calling it the most piteous thing his eyes ever looked upon in all his sufferings on the sea. The ship surges forward, breaking free of the currents and leaving the monsters behind. But the cost of this survival is a deep, psychological wound. The unwritten social contract between the commander and his men has been quietly, irreparably broken. The men who survive the strait are exhausted, traumatized, and deeply suspicious of the man steering their fate. The bond of trust that held them together through a decade of war has finally begun to snap. That heavy burden of leadership finally fractures on a quiet, sun-drenched beach, resulting in the ultimate mutiny. A beautiful, sun-drenched beach can mask the most lethal trap of all. After the crushing psychological trauma and physical loss of the narrow strait, the exhausted crew rows their surviving ship toward the glittering shores of Thrinacia. It is a lush, vibrant island dedicated entirely to Helios, the ancient god of the sun, whose immortal cattle graze peacefully along the green hillsides. Before they even step off the wooden deck, the commander delivers a stark, absolute warning he received from both the witch and the blind prophet. They must not harm a single animal on this island, or the entire expedition will be erased from the earth. The men, weeping with exhaustion and desperate to simply stand on solid ground, swear a solemn oath to leave the herds alone and survive solely on the rations stored deep in the ship's hold. They imagine a brief, restful night before pushing back out to sea. It is a fragile promise made by men who do not yet understand the terrifying patience of the sky. A vow made on a full stomach rarely survives the agonizing hollow of an empty one. The atmosphere itself becomes an invisible, impenetrable prison wall. For the first few days, the crew rests on the warm sand, eating their stored barley and drinking their dark wine. But when they attempt to leave, a massive weather system settles over the sea. A relentless south wind begins to howl across the water, blowing continuously and violently for an entire month, making it physically impossible to launch a square-rigged Bronze Age sailing vessel into the current. Ancient ships could not tack efficiently against a strong headwind. The men are essentially pinned to the beach by millions of tons of rapidly moving air. Day after day, they watch the whitecaps churn offshore, knowing that to launch the boat is to immediately capsize and drown. The endless howling of the wind becomes a psychological torture, a constant sonic reminder of their absolute helplessness. The most secure cages are not forged from iron bars, but from the invisible, relentless mechanics of meteorology. The human body will systematically consume itself to keep the brain awake. As the month drags on, the clay jars of wine run dry, and the wooden chests of barley are scraped entirely hollow. The men are forced to scavenge the rocky shorelines, fishing with bent wire and hunting thin seabirds, but the calories are vastly insufficient for heavy, muscular oarsmen. When the digestive system is completely empty, the body begins to aggressively harvest its own internal resources, first depleting glycogen stores in the liver, and then breaking down fat reserves. When those are gone, the metabolism initiates a brutal phase of catabolism, actively tearing apart muscle tissue to convert proteins into the glucose the brain desperately requires to function. The physical pain is acute, an agonizing cramp radiating through the abdomen, accompanied by profound lethargy and intense thermal sensitivity. The men shivering on the beach are not just hungry. They are slowly, agonizingly dissolving from the inside out. A starving mind eventually views every sacred law as a meaningless obstacle. As the physiological damage deepens, the psychological architecture of the crew begins to violently collapse. The prefrontal cortex, the area of the brain responsible for complex decision-making, moral reasoning, and impulse control, is highly sensitive to glucose deprivation. As the men watch the fat, healthy cattle of the sun god grazing lazily on the green hills just a few yards away, their religious awe is rapidly eclipsed by a primal, biological imperative to survive. Their solemn oaths become hollow concepts in the face of agonizing physical pain. Hunger is a highly corrosive acid that slowly burns away the thin veneer of civilization, leaving only the desperate, snapping jaws of the animal beneath. It is a terrifying realization that human morality is deeply tethered to the availability of a simple meal. We are only as righteous as our last harvest. The breaking point of a military hierarchy arrives on a quiet afternoon. Desperate for a solution, Odysseus leaves the camp and walks alone up a sheltered ravine to pray to the gods for salvation, but instead, he falls into a deep, exhausted sleep. In his absence, his second-in-command, Eurylochus, gathers the hollow-eyed crew and delivers a speech that relies on a chilling, undeniable logic. He argues that while every form of human death is terrible, to die slowly of starvation on a deserted beach is the most pitiful, agonizing fate a warrior can endure. He proposes they slaughter the sacred cattle, eat their fill, and face the wrath of the gods later, reasoning that it is far better to drown quickly in a sudden storm than to waste away into nothingness on the sand. The men agree instantly. They butcher the finest cattle, roasting the meat over open fires, breaking their oaths in exchange for the temporary, overwhelming relief of hot food. Mutiny rarely begins with a malicious desire for power. It usually begins with a rational, desperate attempt to end an unbearable pain. The retribution of the physical world is swift and mathematically absolute. When the wind finally shifts 6 days later, the well-fed crew launches their ship into the deep blue water, leaving the island behind. But as soon as the land drops below the horizon, the sky turns a bruised, unnatural purple. A massive, towering cumulonimbus storm cell materializes directly above them. The poem describes the god Zeus hurling a blinding lightning bolt directly into the ship. In meteorological terms, a wooden mast protruding from the flat surface of the ocean acts as a perfect lightning rod, drawing a massive electrostatic discharge from the charged clouds. The superheated plasma of the lightning strike instantly vaporizes the moisture inside the ship's timbers, causing the wooden hull to violently explode outward from the pressure. The air fills with the smell of sulfur and burning pitch as the ship is shattered into 1,000 pieces, throwing the men violently into the churning, freezing waves. The ocean does not hold a grudge or negotiate with oaths. It simply balances its vast, chaotic equations with terrifying indifference. The great warlord is suddenly reduced to a single organism, clinging to a piece of driftwood. As the storm rages, Odysseus watches the bodies of his men bobbing like seabirds in the dark water before slipping beneath the surface forever. The grand expedition and a decade of shared suffering are erased in seconds. Using pieces of raw leather, he manages to lash the broken mast and the shattered keel together, creating a tiny, fragile raft just large enough to support his weight. He is now completely, utterly alone, drifting silently in a vast, dark expanse of water without a sail, without food, and without a single voice to answer him in the dark. The noise of the storm is replaced by the overwhelming, heavy silence of absolute isolation. Stripped of his army, his ship, and his friends, the brilliant tactician is stripped down to the barest, most fragile spark of human consciousness. To lose everything is to finally discover the exact weight of a human soul. Stripped of his army, his ship, and his friends, the great warlord is reduced to absolute zero. He washes up on an island where time stands still. The transition from absolute chaos to absolute perfection can be its own form of trauma. After the catastrophic destruction of his ship and the drowning of his mutinous crew, the lone survivor drifts on a makeshift raft of lashed timber for 9 agonizing days. Sun-blistered, starving, and stripped of every physical and emotional tether, he finally washes ashore on the island of Odyssey. The crashing, violent fury of the open ocean is suddenly replaced by the gentle, rhythmic lap of crystal-clear water against a pristine beach. There are no monsters waiting in the shallows, no violent storms brewing on the horizon, and no starving men begging for leadership. There is only an overwhelming, fragrant warmth and the paralyzing quiet of a perfect sanctuary. But for a man whose entire identity was forged in the fires of a 10-year war and the desperate struggle to lead his fleet home, a sudden, enforced peace does not feel like salvation. It feels like a beautiful, silent grave. The ecosystem of the island is engineered to be a flawless, biological paradise. The ancient bards describe Odyssey as a place so breathtakingly beautiful that even a passing god would pause in silent wonder. It is ruled by the nymph Calypso, who takes the broken king into her deep, resonant caves, nursing him back to health with divine nectar and sweet ambrosia. The landscape is thick with fragrant cedar and alder trees, sheltering horned owls and sea falcons. 4 crystal springs run clear and cold through meadows of blooming violets and wild parsley. It is a subtropical haven entirely untouched by winter, disease, or famine. But a cage, no matter how thickly woven with blooming vines and sweet-smelling flowers, remains a cage. Calypso does not wish to harm the king. She simply wishes to keep him forever. The velvet trap of Odyssey relies on the insidious premise that physical comfort can somehow replace the deep, complex ache of human purpose. The human brain is not built to endure the crushing weight of infinite, unchanging isolation. Even though Odysseus shares his days with a beautiful, immortal goddess, he is entirely severed from the complex social web that defines human existence. Modern psychology and sociology recognize that our identities are largely constructed through our interactions with our community. We know exactly who we are because of the friction, the expectations, and the love we share with our families, our rivals, and our peers. When a person is removed from their society and placed into extreme isolation, the neural pathways responsible for social cognition begin to fray. The mind, lacking the mirror of other human faces to reflect its own existence, begins to slowly lose its shape. The king of Ithaca is no longer a commander, a husband, or a father. He is simply a kept organism in a beautiful terrarium, slowly forgetting the specific weight of his own name. Without the friction of progress, the perception of time collapses into a suffocating, golden haze. In our normal lives, we measure the passage of time through biological and environmental markers. We watch our children grow taller. We observe the leaves changing color with the seasons, and we feel our own joints stiffen with age. This concept is deeply rooted in chronobiology, the internal clocks that regulate our physiological circadian rhythms in response to a changing environment. But on Odyssey, nothing ever changes. The weather is perpetually perfect. The goddess never ages a single day, and the environment provides no physical indicators of decay or growth. Odysseus remains trapped on this island for 7 long years, but without the physical markers of change, those 7 years compress into a single, agonizing moment of stasis. A life without seasons is a life that is completely stalled. Time is only valuable because it is constantly running out. The ultimate temptation offered in the dark cave is the total biological suspension of aging. Calypso deeply loves the mortal king, and she offers him a gift that human beings have chased in laboratories and alchemical texts for thousands of years. She offers to make him immortal, promising that he will never grow old, never suffer illness, and never die if he will only agree to stay with her in the fragrant caves. To a man whose body is heavily scarred by a decade of bronze weapons and brutal ocean storms, the promise of cellular invulnerability is a profound temptation. It is the promise of stepping entirely off the painful, grinding wheel of human biology. But the king quietly, persistently refuses the offer. He recognizes a terrifying truth about human nature. The beauty and the urgency of a human life are entirely dependent on its fragility. If there is no death, there are no stakes. An immortal life is merely an endless, hollow echo. The most enduring image of this long captivity is a study in profound, irreconcilable grief. The ancient poem presents us with a striking, deeply moving portrait of the stranded king. Every day, while the goddess sings at her golden loom in the warm cave, the great tactician walks down to the rocky shoreline. He sits on the jagged stones, staring out at the barren, empty expanse of the sea, and he simply weeps. He is surrounded by divine beauty, offered eternal youth, and shielded from every physical harm, yet he is completely shattered. It is a powerful psychological revelation. It proves that human happiness cannot be synthesized through mere environmental comfort. We are creatures built for the struggle, for the journey, and for the specific, messy, painful love of our mortal families. He would rather return to a wife who is growing older and a rocky island that is difficult to farm than remain in a flawless, unchanging paradise. The sudden reintroduction of agency requires the brutal physics of physical labor. After 7 years of stagnation, the gods finally intervene, sending Hermes to order Calypso to release her captive. But the gods do not provide a magical ship to carry him home. The nymph simply provides Odysseus with a heavy bronze axe, a smoothed adze, and the location of the tallest trees on the island. After 7 years of being served nectar and ambrosia, the king must strip off his fine garments and return to the blistered, exhausted reality of physical labor. He chops down 20 massive trees, trims the branches, and relies on his deep understanding of ancient maritime engineering to construct a broad, flat-bottomed raft. He uses wooden dowels and complex lashings to bind the raw timber tow. They're raising a mast and weaving a sail from coarse cloth. The sheer, exhausting effort of building the raft is the very mechanism that reawakens his dormant humanity. We are defined by the work of our hands and the sweat we pour into the things we build. To leave the island is to choose the terrifying vulnerability of the open ocean over the safety of the shore. When the wooden raft is finally complete, he uses wooden levers to push it down the sand and into the heavy surf. He leaves behind a weeping goddess, a flawless ecosystem, and the absolute guarantee of eternal life. He trades a perfect, painless existence for a small piece of wood, a crude sail, and the statistical likelihood that he will drown in the cold, dark water before he ever sees his home. It is a decision that defies all basic biological imperatives for safety and survival. But it is the ultimate declaration of what it means to be human. He chooses the storm, the pain, and the uncertainty, because that is the only path that leads back to his own mortal life. The stars guide him silently for 17 days in the dark, but the ocean is not quite finished breaking him. The mechanics of celestial navigation rely on the fragile assumption of a clear, unchanging sky. For 17 days, the solitary sailor drifts across the vast, featureless expanse of the Mediterranean, holding his course by observing the slow, steady rotation of the constellations. He watches the Pleiades and the late-setting Boötes, keeping the Great Bear strictly on his left hand exactly as instructed by the goddess. In the Bronze Age, before the invention of the magnetic compass or the astrolabe, human survival on the open ocean depended entirely on this intricate visual relationship with the cosmos. The stars act as a fixed, reliable map projected onto the dark roof of the world. On the 18th day, a shadow emerges on the horizon. The mountains of Syria, the land of the Phaeacians, finally appear like a shield resting on the misty sea. Deliverance is within sight. But the ocean is a dynamic, unforgiving fluid, and the god of the sea, returning from the edges of the earth, spots the lone raft. With a mere shift of divine will, the clear sky is violently erased, replaced by a sudden, towering wall of cyclonic pressure. The meteorological violence of a Mediterranean squall is sudden and absolute. Ancient sailors lived in perpetual fear of the heavy, descending winds that can drop from the mountains and whip a calm sea into a chaotic frenzy within minutes. The poem describes all the winds of heaven clashing together in a single, terrifying locus of energy. The sky turns pitch black, and a massive rogue wave, a wall of deep, crushing water, rises up from the dark. The physics of a rogue wave are terrifying. They are formed by the rare, constructive interference of multiple wave trains, resulting in a sudden, mountainous surge of kinetic energy that is mathematically capable of snapping heavy timber like dry kindling. The massive swell crashes directly down onto the fragile raft, violently snapping the mast and throwing the steering oar into the churning foam. The painstakingly built vessel, the product of heavy labor and desperate hope, is instantly reduced to scattered, useless debris. The king is thrown deep into the freezing, turbulent dark. The physiological reality of near drowning is a desperate, agonizing internal battle. When a human body is violently submerged in cold, turbulent water, the mammalian dive reflex instantly triggers. The heart rate slows dramatically, and blood is rapidly shunted away from the extremities and redirected to the brain and vital organs to preserve the last remaining oxygen. The heavy, salt-soaked garments given to him by Calypso become a lethal anchor, dragging him further down into the crushing pressure of the deep. He fights his way back to the surface, spitting the bitter brine from his lungs, his muscles burning with lactic acid and acute hypoxia. The ancient narrative does not gloss over the physical horror of this moment. He is not a graceful hero swimming effortlessly through the foam. He is a terrified, suffocating mammal, clinging desperately to a single piece of shattered timber, tossed relentlessly in the boiling surf like a piece of dry thistle caught in an autumn wind. Survival in the open ocean eventually demands the absolute surrender of all physical defenses. A sea nymph named Ino, observing his desperate struggle, rises from the foam and offers him a terrifying piece of advice. She tells him he must strip off his heavy, waterlogged clothing, abandon the splintered remains of his raft, and wrap her divine veil around his chest. He must swim for the distant shore with nothing but his own fading biological strength. It takes a profound psychological shift to abandon the only piece of solid wood keeping you afloat in a raging storm. After agonizing hesitation, a massive wave finally shatters his timber completely, forcing his hand. He strips naked, wraps the veil around his chest, and dives headfirst into the freezing surge. For 2 days and 2 nights, he swims through the heavy swells. The human body is incredibly resilient, but it is not built for prolonged exposure to cold seawater. He pushes his metabolism to the absolute brink of systemic failure, burning through every remaining calorie just to keep his head above the suffocating dark. Making landfall on a rocky, wind-battered coastline is often more lethal than the open ocean itself. As a massive swell finally lifts him toward the shore of Syria, he hears the terrifying, deafening roar of the surf smashing against a solid reef. When a heavy ocean swell meets a shallow, jagged coastline, the kinetic energy of the water is violently converted into crushing, vertical force. If he is thrown against the sharp, barnacle-encrusted rocks, his bones will be instantly pulverized. The ocean, having failed to drown him in the deep, now attempts to batter him to death against the earth. He is swept forward, desperately grabbing a sharp spur of rock with his bare hands, the jagged stone tearing the skin from his fingers as the receding wave violently rips him back out into the deep water. It is a grueling, agonizing lesson in coastal geology. The shore is not always a welcoming sanctuary. It is often a heavily armored fortress actively repelling those who try to survive the sea. The mechanics of salvation often require finding the exact point where 2 opposing forces neutralize each other. Recognizing that the rocky cliffs will surely kill him, the exhausted king swims parallel to the dangerous surf, scanning the dark coastline for a geological fracture. He finally spots the mouth of a fast-flowing, freshwater river emptying into the sea. This is a critical observation of coastal geography. A strong river current acts as a natural buffer, pushing back against the heavy ocean swells and creating a narrow corridor of calm, deep water, free of jagged rocks and violent breakers. He prays to the spirit of the river, begging for sanctuary, and swims desperately into the current. The sudden transition from the heavy, blinding salt of the ocean to the smooth, cold embrace of fresh water is a profound biological relief. The river allows him to finally drag his broken, bleeding body onto the muddy bank, safe from the crushing teeth of the sea. The immediate aftermath of extreme trauma requires an urgent, deeply primal retreat into the earth. When Odysseus finally collapses in the reeds along the riverbank, his physical condition is critical. His knees give way, his heavy arms drop, and seawater gushes from his mouth and nostrils. His core body temperature is plummeting toward lethal hypothermia, and his pulse is faint and erratic. He cannot simply rest on the exposed mud, or the night air will freeze the remaining life from his blood. Driven by the absolute, fundamental instinct of a freezing animal, he crawls away from the water and up into the dense brush. He finds a thick copse of wild and domestic olive trees growing closely together, forming a natural, protective canopy against the wind. He digs a deep trench in the thick, dry accumulation of fallen leaves and buries his naked body entirely in the earth, much like a lonely farmer burying a glowing coal under the ashes to preserve the fire for the morning. To be reborn into civilization, one must first be stripped of every previous identity. As the heavy, dreamless sleep of absolute exhaustion finally overtakes him under the olive leaves, the warlord of Ithaca ceases to exist. He is no longer a cunning tactician, a commander of ships, or a wealthy king. The sea has methodically stripped away his armor, his wealth, his crew, and finally, the very clothes from his back. He has been reduced to a scarred, nameless organism buried in the dirt. But this brutal reduction is a necessary psychological reset. When he wakes on this new island, he will not enter the grand halls of the Phaeacians as a conquering hero demanding respect and wielding a bronze sword. He will enter as a naked, vulnerable supplicant, relying entirely on his wit, his humility, and the fragile grace of human hospitality. The ocean breaks the ego to ensure the man can survive the quiet shores of peace. Part 14. The Architecture of Empathy and the Neuroscience of Trauma. The return to the human world begins with a delicate and highly dangerous negotiation. After a heavy, death-like sleep buried deep beneath the olive leaves, the survivor is abruptly awakened by the sharp, echoing sound of women's voices. It is Princess Nausicaa of the Phaeacians and her handmaidens, who have come to the river mouth to wash the palace linens and play a game of ball on the sand. The king of Ithaca emerges from the dense brush completely naked, his skin deeply crusted with dried sea salt, his hair matted with sand, and his eyes hollowed out by starvation. The ancient poem compares his emergence to a desperate, weather-beaten mountain lion stepping out from the dark timber to hunt among the flocks. It is a moment of intense biological tension. The handmaidens, confronted with the sudden, terrifying appearance of a feral, ruined man, instantly succumb to the primal fight-or-flight response of their nervous systems, scattering in blind panic down the shoreline. But the princess remains standing entirely still, forcing a profound, quiet confrontation between the wildness of survival and the architecture of civilization. The ancient concept of hospitality was not merely a system of polite manners, but a strict evolutionary survival mechanism. In the fractured, dangerous landscape of the Bronze Age Mediterranean, there were no police forces, no international embassies, and no safe hotels. An unknown man emerging from the wilderness was statistically a lethal threat, a pirate, a scout for a raiding party, or a murderer in exile. To counteract this constant ambient paranoia, ancient Greek society developed the rigid, sacred institution of xenia, or guest friendship. This social contract dictated that a host must welcome, feed, and protect a stranger without question, and in return, the stranger must not harm the host. It was a mutual non-aggression pact guaranteed by the highest authority of the gods, specifically Zeus, who was said to walk the earth disguised as a beggar to test the morality of kings. Xenia was a sociological firewall, engineered to prevent every encounter between strangers from instantly devolving into bloodshed. To disarm the physical threat response, the warlord must weaponize his command of language. Odysseus recognizes that if he rushes forward and falls to his knees to grab the princess's legs, the traditional physical